this going. So with that, I will turn this over to Bob. Bob, you should be able to share your slides and look forward to your discussion. If you do have questions, you can place them in the chat box. We'll try to answer them towards the end of the presentation.
Okay, I can hear everybody. Can you all hear me? Yep. Oh, great. Well, hello.
Mute. There we go. Unmute first. Then we'll share screen. I think this will work. All right. Looks like it's working. Bob can do it. Well, thank you all for inviting me back. This little presentation, I've got some more opinions about it now. I actually did about a year ago for the APA. But it's still relevant, and particularly relevant after the trying times we've had since for the last year, certainly a year and a half, as Justin's pointed out. I'm going to throw in some more opinions, maybe some updates, congratulate ourselves on the kind of planning we're doing in this region. I won't get it all, so I'll look for help from panelists as well as participants to say, well, we're doing this too and doing that too, and try to be on the upside of things. But I got prompted by this article. It was in the July 5th issue of the New York Times in 1920. That was a long time ago too, in 2020. Because I've got, as Justin pointed out, something of an economics background from the Mid-American Conference, which includes Ball State and Miami. I read through it cover to cover. There are actually 14 essays. And then a 15th essay on what the New York Times editorial board thought could be done to address some of the issues raised on the economy we need. Now, keep in mind, and if I need to remind you, the New York Times has a left-leaning political bent and that sort of thing. So as I do. So when I read through it, I'm all for a lot of these things, but you don't have to be. And I'd love to hear some commentary on that as well. But once I read it, I said, what can planners do to address some of these challenges on the economy that we really need as opposed to what we have? And so I changed the title of all this a year ago to the planners we need to create the economy we need. And I'm going to go through a lot of the essay summaries very quickly, then do some commentary on the ideas that emerged from the New York Times and some of my own opinions about that. And then we'll look forward to panel response as well as participant response. And are we going in the right direction? Is St. Louis doing what it can to be part of this? What are we doing that's special? What are we doing that we need to learn and get better at? So these are the opinions. And these again are all the opinion statements of the 14 authors in the New York Times piece. I'm going to walk through very quickly each one of those just to remind us what they are. The jobs we need was an opinion piece, and a lot of issues raised within it, but certainly one of them is what are the jobs that we're not getting? And a graphic like this is actually borrowed from Keith Zeff, longtime colleague, and he's a former boss of mine. If you want to be on a good blog, does the 50-year perspective. Go sign up for that. Every couple of weeks, he keeps us informed with the truth, that is data that Keith is very big upon. So, a union membership is just one of those indicators of what we've kind of lost in a lot of the jobs. Certainly since the Great Recession, which is now well over a decade ago, we have gained, for the most part, relatively gained lower wage jobs and higher wage jobs. We lost a lot of middle income jobs. And folks who were occupying a lot of those middle income jobs, manufacturing, production workers, some skills, some pretty good skills, but not the education you needed to move up when jobs disappeared. and many of them had to move down and took lower wages and probably overqualified. That was a big issue post-recession. I think it's a big issue right now during and following up the pandemic. We're kind of seeing it in resistance of people to fill jobs that are too much at the lower end. Does that mean people are going back to school? I don't know. But I read yesterday that St. Louis University's freshman class of this year is the second largest in history. So maybe people are thinking about going back to school and getting that. American workers deserve to live with dignity, a big issue when we see the gap between the rich and the rest of us. You see there in about the early 70s, the period when I started entering the labor force, that the productivity of the United States still going up. Great, on a labor basis, we're doing it. But hourly compensation kind of disappeared. And we're not really being paid as workers the value of what we're producing. That's on a macro basis. Are you willing to give up your privilege? Asking really those who have the money and the power. And another graphic that Keith Zeff produced the other day, it begins to tell that story. As it turns out, if you're talking to rich people, a piece on NPR the other day, and I didn't catch it all, I need to go back and look. But basically, the reporter said that all the rich people he talked to said yes, in effect, they're willing to give up a lot of their privilege in order to better support the economy and those who have less privilege. It's just we haven't gotten there in the policy and political realm yet. So further research, but an interesting thought. Employer-based healthcare, meet massive unemployment. It's marvelous that I can't keep calm because I got a job. A nice little sign I found. And with that, probably also got health insurance, but I lost my job and I probably lost my health insurance too. That's a big issue, as we know. Obamacare is covering some of that, maybe, but not entirely, and still a lot of issues regarding that. So what the economy we really need to think about how people can have more dignity with their jobs, but also be able to change without losing some of the important benefits that we have. By the way, as an old guy, I'm now on Medicare, and it's marvelous because no matter what I do, I still have healthcare. I recommend it, but you have to live long enough. How much money Americans actually make? One of the things we don't talk about in America is how much money we make. Do I know what you're making and vice versa? As it turns out, industries and countries that know more about that distribution of wages and salaries, compensation, find more equity throughout it. Because now I know what you're doing and I can, negotiate better or argue better in the public realm. We see some of this. The Post-Dispatch is pretty good about publishing every public employee's wages, it looks like. So at least we know what Justin's making. I don't know if he's on the list of that in the public sector. But we've found in professional sports where there's a lot of talk all the time about what somebody signed for. Now that actually has had the long-term effect of equalizing those salaries within. They're different from sport to sport, of course, but also the players and agents understanding what others are doing. And so how do we compare to those people? So you can probably get a better salary distribution, wage distribution if we knew more about one another. Back the 50s into the 60s, probably ending around the late 60s, early 70s, there was a lot more profit sharing. So there was motivation on the part of businesses and employees to make more money in their companies, be that motivated, and then I'll get a piece of that pie. That really has tailed off quite a bit since the 70s and the 80s. And that's one of the reasons that other graph shows that CEO compensation and related compensation is going up while the rest of us aren't doing as well as we should. Back in the day, back when my dad was working a lot, there was a lot more of this kind of thing going on. So what's to motivate us as workers? And I'm sensing a lot of lack of motivation in the economy right now with people not taking all these jobs. Banks, interesting, they should face history. This is a pretty strong statement. And pay some reparations. Well, as it turns out, the essay deals with not so much going back and paying everybody, but let's pay more in the banking and related industries so that when We don't discriminate anymore. Let's deal with injustices of the past by making up for them in the future. It's not so much paying for the past as it is paying forward, but they specifically pick on banks. Of course, it's maybe not just banks of what they're getting paid, what the jobs are, but how are they lending? Who are they lending to? And we all know that's a big issue, particularly with housing. American companies are sick, and here's how to cure them. Well, yes, many companies are bought out because they kind of don't know how to run themselves. And they may have a pretty good concept, a product, service, but that's very often the product of a very smart person or persons knowing having something that's great and the economy needs it. Problem is they're not business people and they don't know how to do that. So many of those companies sometimes want to be bought out. They want to get because they can make a profit, but they don't. Many of them want to stay in business, just don't know how. So how do we go about that? Through our business schools and through our chambers of commerce and related to help businesses stay in business and maybe grow, maybe even be more profitable and probably diversify the number of companies we have. Black-white wage gaps as big as it was 70-ish, 60, 70 years ago. I almost don't need to say more. We all should know this, what's been going on. It's not pleasant. It gets a little bit back to that bank reparations kind of thing as well. How do we fix this? And maybe knowing more what people make. We can say, well, I do the same thing. I ought to be paid that much too, or we need to bring down her salary because she's making too much. Women ask themselves, this is one of the essays, how can I do this for one more day? Mostly focused on relatively high and rapidly growing back years ago, female participation rate in the labor force, that is paying jobs, but also having more than their fair share of responsibilities for households and raising families. We still know that's a big issue, and it's tiring, if nothing else, particularly in an age when we have a greater amount of single mothers. Where are the fathers? I can't quite figure that out. But what's the challenge there? We're seeing a little decline in labor force participation rate in recent years, but a lot of that's due to aging of the population. But women are rapidly rise. If you notice that piece coming out of the 50s and rising all the way into the 90s, most of that's due to the baby boomers and educating women almost on an equal basis with men, boys at the time when we were in school, and then them wanting to enter the labor force like the rest of us. And there's a lot of them, a lot of men too, but a lot of women joining the labor force and wanting to participate in it, and deservedly so. Future work isn't what people think. I saw this little ad for grandpas. Like, yeah, back in the day, my grandpa would have been one of these guys that wears a hard hat and steel-toed boots. The future is not that so much. We've changed a lot of those jobs, as we've seen on many news reports and economic reports, to either not having those kinds of jobs or heavily machine and robotics driven, technology driven, because they're dangerous, they're hard work, to what the folks on the right here, wearing scrubs and sneakers, more personal service kinds of jobs, and less of the hard work, having to use your brawn. More brains, still some brawn, as we know, particularly with these medical workers, if they look like that, and how fatigued they've become with the pandemic. It's still hard work, but not quite as wearing, and people are living longer as opposed to. But it's not, the jobs of the future really aren't in the mines or even in a lot of other assembly kinds of jobs. Maybe they are in other countries because of wage things, but not in the United States. So how do we get people to be able to move up that scale, if you will, with brains and less brawn? The tax the rich and their heirs. The big issue, you go back, this one goes back to 19, gap got bigger, it's only gotten bigger over time. And as I think we all know, is that fair? Are people earning their keep? Some 40% of family wealth is passed on, suggesting that 40% of the wealth in these United States based on non-work. To some degree, that's fine. We all help our families out by paying forward a little bit, having some wealth to call on for down payments on homes and certain levels of education. But the gap is huge. And should we be taxing that and try to move that, redistribute that around? Some matter. Why do the rich have so much power? Because they're rich, right? Political power, economic power, legal power. We see it in the news all the time. That's a big issue. Like, how do we spread that wealth a little bit? When you see some of the big wigs getting sued or in criminal action, I kind of have this thing in my heart that says, it's about time, It's probably not fair, but it's also like too much has been going on with the rich having so much power that we seem, at least it perceived as, they get unequal treatment than the rest of us. And finally, the idea was to bring on the 28th Amendment. Well, I hope you know, because you're civic minded, that there is no 28th Amendment of the United States Constitution. We ended at 27, but there have been ideas for a 28th Amendment. The chief one that they're talking about in this particular article is that we need to even out voting rights. Now, there are other ways to think about the 28th Amendment or the Equal Rights Amendment or whatever you might do. You always have 29, 30, 31 amendments too. But the one that the New York Times focused on is let's make sure that that we're not abridging the right to vote. Apparently within the Constitution, there's all kinds of prohibitions about not allowing people to vote, but nothing that says you can vote or should vote. It's a strange kind of a thing, sort of negatively backing into it. So those are the ideas. The final essay in that New York Times report was called America Needs Repairs, and here's where it starts. So the New York Times editorial board said, okay, we've read all of those. Now here's some ideas on what we would do. I pulled a few of them, most of them that relate to how I feel as a planner, kind of in the macro sense, occasionally in this more local sense, but what can, and causing me, hopefully causing you to think about what can we do as a planning profession, as planners in our own communities and our firms, to make a difference, to address the economy we need. So there are four main topic areas that they addressed. One was a fair chance for children. The second is on workers' comp. That is getting paid, but also the health side of that. A stronger safety net for all of us. We've seen some value of that, particularly during the pandemic period, with a lot of money being spent to protect us from unemployment and some other healthcare issues. It's actually had a pretty good effect. Can we keep that up? Should we keep it up? Is another question. And certainly then the will of the people, the fourth main topic. So on the fair chance for children, the Times suggests let's create a federal savings account for every newborn child. Give them $1,000 when they're born and let it grow. Don't, and beyond that, the red stuff here, by the way, is what they said in the article. The gray stuff is mine. These are sort of where I took those thoughts, whether I'm right or wrong, or if I thought them all out, I don't know, not yet. But build wealth in all Americans. We need more of that. We need more wealth spread around. We know there's a huge gap between whites and blacks, rich and poor in terms of wealth, and wealth is important for raising kids, for buying homes, for starting businesses. And if we don't have wealth, and that's different than income, I hope you understand, that it makes us all better off, more prosperous. Certainly don't allow anybody to access that money, that savings account, until they're adults. You don't want your parents rating that, hey, there's $800 in an account. Let me go get that. No, you can't touch that. But even with today's lousy interest rates, you can actually have a pretty good lump sum of money by the time you get to be an adulthood, that you can do something with. You know, finish a college education, start a business, down payment on a house. So also under fair chance for children, let's eliminate, this is the Times saying, it's again, the red is what the Times said, eliminate single family zoning. You know, Minneapolis was in the news at the time. Could be a big step toward more housing creation, housing affordability, maybe reduced racism, as we've all begun to see that a lot of single family zoning is actually a backdoor way to be racist, because the wealth is not within the people of color class, if you will. Hopefully it's improving, but it's still a long way off. Possibly also then the more efficient use of land and infrastructure as we planners should be attuned to, and recognize that single family housing districts are far too restrictive related to the first step as well. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. We need to talk about those kinds of things. Fair chance for children also provide universal pre-K. One of the issues for education in these United States is that we've known for years. Back when I was in high school, we were talking about this, and probably well before that, that being prepared for kindergarten is as important as being prepared for first grade through kindergarten. And pre-kindergarten, daycare kinds of things, good stuff is expensive, and probably should be more expensive because we often don't pay our daycare workers enough. And so how do we prepare for all that? Well, you can say, when my kids were in daycare, we had 2 salaries in my house. We could afford pretty good daycare. We went to a nonprofit and paid the full fare and donated money. Now, not every family can do that. In fact, most can't, especially when they're young families. You don't have the incomes yet, the wealth. You can't afford it. So, but is it good for we as a society to have kids that are better prepared? To my mind, we can't afford not to do that. We need to be educating and preparing people much better off. And also under the fair chance for children category, New York Times says, let's spend more on the education of low-income children. Same idea. Spending, is that the right answer? Sometimes it's reworking the system. It's kind of like defunding the police. Well, it's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about how we move money, spend the money more wisely for different purposes. So let's think about it, is it really spending so much as it is reworking the system? Yes, in some ways it is. If we want good people, well-trained to be in helping with the education of kids, they need to be paid well too. A living wage, maybe more than that. Can we redistribute school district taxes? Some school districts are rich, some are poor. Actually, some of the school funding formulas are kind of amazing how well they can do that. So that some of the richer districts are ended up being contributors to poor ones. Get rid of leaded water pipes. Where does that idea come from? Well, it fell out of one of the articles. All of them, there's an article today, newspaper today, that half of American children are exposed to, have lead in their systems. Not seriously. It's a small number that have serious problems with it, but it's like really still around, mostly coming from lead paint in old houses kind of thing. So what can we be doing now that? Certainly we got exposed to, so to speak, to that with the Flint, Michigan issue, but it's kind of everywhere with pipes and with paint, old piping, plumbing. Workers' compensation instruct the Federal Reserve to minimize black unemployment. That's a huge issue with us. The Fed's main responsibility is low inflation and low unemployment on the macro sense. But the idea here is let's target toward particular groups that aren't decently sharing in America's prosperity. So it's not, is that a Federal Reserve responsibility? You'd think it would be probably more a congressional or state legislative responsibility. But we find with the politics of all that, people like to spend but not cut back or move things around. They cater more to privileged groups, those who have the power. And good data, appropriate analysis data will identify those target groups and locations of them, while also hopefully measuring the right amount of progress. Increase the minimum wage. This is an old story, but still true. Federal minimum wage hasn't changed. Can planning policies lead to local regulations on minimum wages? Now, we've seen the market respond to this to some degree during the pandemic and hopefully post, particularly in the restaurant industry and retail industry. How do we keep workers here? Because they can drop out. We got that kind of tested maybe to some degree with the added unemployment benefits, so people didn't have to go back to work right away. I think this jury's still out on how important that move was temporarily. But nevertheless, people got to say, and you see a lot of protests, like, you know, if it's only $9, $10, $12 an hour, I don't need that job. And we're seeing some repercussions of that in the economy as we speak. Double the earned income tax credit. And in theory, the rich can afford to pay for it. Now, we're seeing some of that kind of movement going on through the Biden administration to some degree in the Congress. Issues like this, there is some support among them, among many of the rich. I say the very rich, those who know, but it hasn't got to the political class yet, if you will. Something we can debate, and is it the right idea? But with more disposable income, poor families increase their multiplier impacts. They buy more, frankly. They don't. Poorer families should be able to save, take some of that extra money, start building up that wealth. But they also tend to buy more. And that's from an economist's point of view, I like to see money moving around. Cash flow makes the world go round. Require employers to pay for family and medical leave. This is a challenging one. But also who is an employee. We've had this discussion for a while now. Our contract or gig employees, are they employees? Should they be part of an employer's benefits package? And we do that with local spending policies. I think of things like minority business enterprises, women business enterprises. We've included a lot of them requirements, minimums for those kinds of businesses in public contracts. Could we do it more broadly? I don't know. There may be a way for us planners to get involved in all that. Labor protection, protections to domestic workers. I can't think why this isn't a good idea. Again, they get treated differently, like gig workers and contract workers. Is that the answer? So whatever protections are there probably ought to apply to everybody. Rich and poor, by the way, for that matter. A stronger safety net. The next topic, New York Times says, let's provide housing vouchers for all eligible families. I get lost in this topic because there's a lot of housing vouchers out there, but I think I hear and read from those in the know that there aren't enough of them. There's long waiting lists or whatever. It certainly would open the market. But I think, frankly, we need to combine that with help for the households to be able to manage their households and budgets and their housing better. You know, if you're going to operate a household, own it or rent it, you got to be reasonably good at it. You know, more training in the high schools or some other kind of assistance, but also for the landlords. You know, many of them don't want vouchers kinds of people. We know what those kinds of people are. So how do we help them deal better with this and not only just, you know, have sticks like no public incentives or other issues for non-compliant landlords, but the carrots, like how can we make you run your properties better? How can we or help you? Reward cities, and I put in regions that allow more housing construction. That you know, basically there's nothing says we have too much housing in America. Now I could say we have too much housing perhaps in the St. Louis region. We're not growing. We keep adding houses. We keep exurbanizing. So we probably have too much housing. A lot of it's vacant, certainly here in the city and parts of St. Louis County, certainly in the river cities of Metro East. Could that be reoccupied? Do we need more construction to provide better housing for places? But an argument or a discussion to be had. We certainly have too much retail space kind of everywhere, and I don't know why we tolerate that. We have issues with that, with how we refill that kind of space, how do we use it? Much of it's not being used for retail specifically, and when I say that, I mean taxable retail, because retail sales taxes are an important part of local government, state government too, for that matter. But just because it's retail or intended to be retail space doesn't mean it's paying sales taxes. And reward in regions like ours that encourage infill and redevelopment before new development. I can get really worked up about how much we've left behind in this region as we've expanded outwardly in kind of all directions. But is that good sustainable planning? I'd say no. So on that safety net, expand the program to end homelessness among veterans to everybody. Apparently, we've got a pretty good program for homeless veterans. Although what I read about veterans is they still got a lot of challenges in how we treat them in the long run. But why not, if we've learned a lot from that, why not do a bit more on that sort of thing? I certainly would agree that veterans serve nobly, but so do many others. To serve the good interests of the United States, if not the world, even us planners. And I hope we don't have any homeless planners, but we might have. I don't know. So what are some of those solutions? Let's talk about those later today. Safety net issue, restore federal funding for public health agencies. Since March 20, we got exposed to all this, that maybe we went way back on a federal basis, we actually cut funding for public health. What? So were we perfectly healthy back then and we didn't need any more? I don't think so. By the way, I'm employed by the College for Public Health and Social Justice, so I have to disclose that. But the planning profession also has huge roots in public health and social justice. If you remember your history of planning, with the emergence of the City Beautiful movement, to keep it simple, when we had immense slums and horrible living conditions, and talk about income inequality and so forth, the planning profession arose out of that. So let's keep it up. The healthier we are, the more productive we are, the wealthier we can all be. As we make it easier for Americans to vote, as we still shift to the will of the people. So back when I first did this was during the primaries before the presidential election. If you remember, for whatever reasons, in Louisville, Kentucky, there was one polling place. Not sure I have that right, but like the lines were like 8 hours long or some crazy thing. Really? I mean, how does that happen? And the mail service was threatening or did slow down. I got a note from my bank the other day that mail service is going to slow down again. So any important papers you have to deal with your financing that have to go by mail allow 2 or 3 extra days. Really? What's America coming to? Make it easier to vote. What's with Texas recently, maybe Missouri for that matter. What are we afraid of? What are they afraid of? These are kind of questions to ask. And as we deal with advocating for the public, for the less advantaged, but even for all of us who are able to do this, are we planners helping to smooth this out and make it actually easier for people to participate in the let's see, provide public funding for congressional candidates. That's what the New York Times said. I wrote in all elected. This could broaden the pool. You don't have to be rich or very good at fundraising necessarily to be a good elected official. So should we all planners ought to be all for greater community engagement, which means a broader pool of candidates who can represent issues or debate properly and come to resolution, compromise resolutions. So let's see if we can start moving where we can have our representatives represent, not spending 2 days a week on the phone raising money. At least that's anecdotally what you hear. One of the things I see for planners in this regard is that we should be a resource for hardcore truth data. Are we sharing that with everybody? Here's the data, here's what we find. I was reading an article the other day on how criminal investigators not only share information with prosecutors, but they also have to give that to the defendants, to the defendants' attorneys. When they're going to court, in theory, they're all going in with the same information. How you interpret it, what it means, what are you going to do with it's another matter. But we planners certainly can have a role. And I mentioned Keith Zeff earlier with his 50-year perspective blog. Keith taught me that 1,000 years ago. Well, 1977, 78. We worked together in the government statistics division at the county planning department. And he said, basically, we're here to make sure that everybody's got the same information. So what can we do? And how can that help with our voting? So where can planners intervene? I'm shifting a little bit here. Nowhere near my saying everything here, but you can intervene with your own comprehensive and strategic plans and ordinances. How do planners encourage discrimination or discourage it, intended or unintended? So we might talk about that, or the panel can address these kinds of questions. How readily available is the data that you use for your job for everybody else? There's a lot, we know data sources, we learn to get them, we practice it, we learn from one another where to get good information, publicly available for the most part, but even from subscription services or primary research out in the field. And is it readily shared? Can the people who are coming to your planning commission meetings and city council public meetings, do they have that information the same as we've got? If they don't, it's maybe their fault, but it might be our fault as well. Do our reports identify and quantify intended and unintended impacts? If this happens, this could happen. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's bad, but public officials who have to make decisions, and most of our planning and development decisions we leave to the elected bodies. We're advisors to them. Are we giving them the right advice? And are we giving them scenarios that can happen? And I throw in, are we planning as a region here and other regions as well to work toward the reduction in global warming and climate change issues, but also evaluating Greater St. Louis as a place for people who need to get away from flooding and hurricanes and all that stuff that we see going on. In many ways, you can evaluate St. Louis, Greater St. Louis anyway, as a place where people should come. Our weather's not too extreme. We don't get hurricanes. We don't get huge flooding with pretty well under control, whatever those issues are. Are we a place where we could be an in-migration region for climate migrants? Now, what are we doing? What can planners intervene? These are projects I'm working on or recently have here in the region. Through the, so Lake St. Louis did it when I was at Development Strategy, so I know there's a plan there. With the others working through SLU and our community planning lab. O'Fallon, Illinois is finishing up its comprehensive plan. Ellisville and Florissant are underway as we speak. I and some of my students are involved with that and some of the consultants here in town. And to me, it's just like, this has all happened in the last few years. A couple of them very current. There's probably more. I'm sure I hope there's more. But it sort of appears that our communities here in this region are planning. Well, good for us. Where's all that coming from? Now, we have been in the past too, but can we keep it up? Are we seriously looking at ourselves and our individual communities and being serious about all of that? We have more regional stuff too. I hope you're all aware of the 2030 jobs plan that's more or less adopted by the business community, which has reorganized itself through Greater St. Louis, Inc. That includes the Chamber of Commerce and the Civic Progress and all those kinds of things, with big goals. Regional. Now, I think a key one here that's we seem to zero in on is the one on the lower left called dealing with the urban core. Questions that I have: are we refilling what we have? Are we using infrastructure and land and buildings that we've already got that we've kind of abandoned? And we've got capacity. So, but that's a goal of this plan here as well. But also just looking at the entire region, are we growing? Are we serious? Are we getting together and doing it? I'm also encouraged on that basis by, and I haven't followed up because I'm not sure what's going on. The Missouri legislative delegation from the St. Louis area has had a meeting or is having meetings to address what more we as a region can and should be doing to promote ourselves, to grow ourselves, to be more relevant in this period, as we learned in the last decade or this current census, that we really didn't grow much at all. And could we have? Or should we have? Should we be prepared for other things? But think about these things that are actually going on. And this one's driven primarily by the business sector, but it also has a lot of public support as well. Where can we intervene? The long-range plan of East-West Gateway, which comes up all the time. You know, it has to be revised and revisited all the time. Are you involved? Mostly it's dealing with transportation questions, but yeah, transportation infrastructure shapes our region. Are we involved? Yeah, that's going on. It has been a long time. Are we involved? Are you paying attention? I looked just for the heck of it, what's the county strategic plan look like? Because I know the county, St. Louis County has it all the time. I didn't find a great graphic, but the current one certainly has addressing priorities, issues that we just talked about from the New York Times issues as well. There's an active strategic plan in St. Louis County. You know? Are we promoting that, talking about it? Are we using it? Are we applying it to our county communities as well as the county government? Where can planners intervene? Even St. Charles County has I say even, sometimes I wonder, but they do have a pretty good looking plan for what St. Charles County is doing. St. Charles County remains our fastest growing county. 2010 to 2020 census says that St. Charles County gained more residents than the region as a whole. So most of us were negative on a county by county level. So good planning needs to be done in the county as well as the municipalities that are there. St. Louis City has its equitable economic development plan. Little bit of trouble. It's hard to read, hard to do, and they've gone out. Maybe I think they've hired another team of consultants to help them get this down to something that's workable, if I'm saying that properly. But not only dealing with regional economic development, but also as an example of focusing in on what the city itself can be doing, let alone other cities and other counties in the region. And I'll close by just saying I'm a big fan of ethics, good ones, as well, and certainly the AICP ethics. And it's important to look at them. Even if you're not an AICP member, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be ethical and in the way we act. And in the ethics, which are pretty lengthy, a good read. And those of us who have to do our CMs, continuing maintenance credits for AICP, are aware of these things, made aware of these things every couple of years as we renew our hours. So, but principle A under the ethics is principles to which we aspire. And number one is our overall responsibility to the public. And under that, there's a number of them, but I'm quoting the F section. Early in the ethics, that we shall seek, we as planners, especially AICP planners, but all planners, seek social justice by working to expand choice and opportunity for all persons, recognizing a special responsibility to plan for the needs of the disadvantaged and to promote racial and economic integration. That's a lot of that is, and therefore, as it says here, we'll urge alteration of policies, institutions, decisions, et cetera, our own plans, how we work in our communities to make sure that these things are positively addressed. And with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up without Porgy the Pig, but here we go. Justin, I'm back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. Wanted to give individuals that are going to be on our panel a chance to kind of introduce their group and their what they are doing. That kind of builds on Bob's talking points. So we'll start with Mary, or Mary, are you still?
I'm here.
Okay, there she is. Mary, I know you're with Heartland's Conservancy in the Metro East. So I know you guys do a lot of great programs, but if you want to give us a quick overview of your organization and kind of how you're building off of what Bob was talking about.
Thanks, Justin. So Heartlands Conservancy, we're a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to improving the lives of people in the greater southwestern Illinois area using community resiliency and sustainability, doing it through that lens. So we're kind of a unique organization in the region. We work in many facets of planning, from everywhere from a site scale to the community and regional scales. And a lot of our work at the moment involves making our watersheds healthier. And so when I say healthy, I mean that we're looking for better water quality overall, whether it's in a rural area. We're working in Highland right now to help them with getting pollutants out of their main drinking water source, which is their big lake, to equitable stormwater management in the region. We also use green infrastructure and the conservation of land to address climate change issues and try to help the region adapt to the impending climate change that keeps becoming worse and worse over time. But along those lines, we also work with parks and open space, using a framework of biodiversity, climate change adaptation, but also using multiple benefits like recreation and just aesthetic beauty for communities. So that is a large breadth of what we do over here in greater southwestern Illinois. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Claire, you've been working with the University of Missouri Extension. Can you kind of talk through what you're doing with communities that kind of build off of Bob's talking points and kind of what you guys do at the extension?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. I just want to admit that I am not a planner by profession, so I feel honored to be included here. So thanks for letting me slide in under the radar there, and I have a great admiration for planners. So happy to be here. And so I work for the University of Missouri Extension, and as part of that, we run 2 community leadership programs. One is called Neighborhood Leadership Academy, and the other is called Neighborhood Leadership Fellows. And with Neighborhood Leadership Academy, it's a statewide program. So we work with communities everywhere from neighborhoods like the Ville and municipalities like Jennings and communities all across the state like Worth County and Gentry County. So at this point, we're in a number of really diverse communities, and we work with residents who are interested in making a difference. Maybe they're really involved already, maybe they're sort of at the beginning stages, but we work on a project by project basis. So all of the participants in our programs have to develop a project for their community. And it's sort of starting planting the seeds of how to be really engaged and impactful in neighborhoods. And so that program has been going since 2002, so 20 years at this point. But about 5 years ago, we started a second program called Neighborhood Leadership Fellows. And this program is in particular for the Promise Zone, so North St. Louis City and parts of North St. Louis County, and really looking at equity and equity around decision-making in communities. So who's sitting on boards, commissions, in elected office, and can we look at making sure that residents from this particular region, the Promise Zone, are serving in these decision-making positions? And on top of that, how do we make sure that resident voice is included in the change that we want to see positively in the St. Louis region as a whole? And so that program has been going for about 5 years now. And so through Neighborhood Leadership Academy, we have about 500 graduates in the region. Neighborhood Leadership Fellows, we have 91. And so looking at building this sort of movement around community voice and community input in the decision-making in our region and the future of our region and the planning of our region. So, I think I'll continue to hammer on that point of the community involvement and community voice in a lot of these policy initiatives that Bob mentioned, in particular around making it easier for people to participate in our democracy, and also planning for greater community engagement. and not only community engagement and community involvement, but really community leadership and having communities being at the helm of a lot of the work that we see in terms of planning in their communities.
Awesome. Thank you, Claire. John Roper, now with the city of St. Louis. John, I know you're just kind of getting started in your role there with the city, but can you talk about what the city's planning folks are working on to try and address some of the things that Bob pointed out, and what planners can do for our communities?
Well, definitely, and thank you very much, Justin, and hello, everybody. Good afternoon to everyone, and thanks for joining. So the city of St. Louis recently has passed a tax, the economic development tax, to do neighborhood planning for all 79 neighborhoods. This is an initiative that has never been done before. Some neighborhoods might have done grassroots efforts, but really all 79 neighborhoods don't have plans. Only about less than 10 do today. So we're looking to create these plans that prepare St. Louis neighborhoods to take advantage of and to grow the opportunities in their neighborhoods, and also alleviate a lot of their issues. We do neighborhood planning through a robust amount of community building, community engagement. We want to hear the voice, we want to hear the input to understand it, and communicate that vision to not only different city departments, but to a bunch of organizations, some I even see here today, that we work together to collaborate and make things happen. There are, in this neighborhood planning process, I believe that there is a great opportunity to communicate not just what the neighborhood needs and wants, but also to collaborate with a lot of different organizations and communities, collaborate and also coordinate efforts together to address a lot of the things that Bob was talking about that we need to address. A lot of the items that, a lot of the issues that we see today are there because, from redlining, but the response to that has to be very coordinated with a lot of different actors and people. So I would just say, with the city of St. Louis, beyond neighborhood planning, we would grow community voice, and we would coordinate, communicate, and collaborate together.
Awesome, thanks, John. I want to move into just some questions for the group. Claire, you talked about how your group is really working at a neighborhood level of engagement. Are you working with and collaborating with other organizations throughout the region in that, or is this a sole sort of extension program?
So I think definitely collaboration is key in everything we do. We're always trying to network and make sure we're organizing with all of the other entities in the region. So with Neighborhood Leadership Fellows, it's a partnership between Extension, UMSL, and the Economic Development Partnership. But then we've also worked with Missouri Foundation for Health, Deaconess Foundation, Violence Prevention Commission, Recast, and a lot of the other kind of major entities in the region who are doing this sort of similar work to engage and resource community voices. But what I think is important with our work is that we're also collaborating and making sure that in the lead of our work is the community resident voice. So a lot of this work is done under the umbrella of a group called Creating Whole Communities, which is an entity that's a partnership between Extension, UMSL, and our region's communities. And a couple of years ago, we changed our structure so that our steering committee is 51% community residents. And so the majority of our steering committee is residents who have gone through our leadership programs and are now the voice leading this particular group. And then the other part of the committee is faculty members from the university in a variety of different fields, from public policy, social work, political science, community development, to make sure that the collaborative voice is there, so that we're all learning from each other, and the community voice is paramount in the conversation, but that also we're making sure that we're not isolating that community voice, and that the conversation continues and we can all be sort of learning from each other. So I would say everything we do is around collaboration, but also making sure that those individuals are in our communities who are doing the hard work on the ground are also their voices are being listened to.
Awesome, thanks, Claire. Mary, you know what? I can't imagine as a consultant the amount of collaboration that goes into a lot of the projects that you guys are working on, just here in this and the Metro East. What do you think are some of the challenges that you see in terms of collaborating with the regional aspect of the St. Louis area?
Yeah, I think collaboration, it can be a challenge. We tend to have a very fractured region with lots of small communities that are all fighting for similar resources, especially if it's an under-resourced community. Then they're fighting against each other, and trying to get two entities like that into a room to collaborate together is a challenge, understandably so. So I think that probably is one of the biggest challenges, is just, you know, the small amount of money, especially over in Metro East, that people are trying to compete for funding for various things, makes it really hard sometimes to get people in the room together. So, yeah.
Great, thanks. John, do you see in your role within the city the same type of issues with the fragmentation that St. Louis has when you're trying to collaborate and bring projects together?
There is fragmentation, and I think this part of the step is to see two things. One is to recognize it and where it's at and kind of some of the causes. And two would be ultimately to, throughout looking at what people are trying to do in the real issue. So sometimes we go down these holes because that's just what was available, and it's been like that for 10 to 20 to 40 years. Versus actually sometimes looking at it in a different light, where you make a program that actually works and how you can pivot to that over time. So like one of the things I know that even if you have some type of coordination or collaboration or an agreement on a vision, places are set out for funding that you know, they follow a plan for 3 to 4 or 5 years, where they have to satisfy some criterias. So they really can't even pivot, even if they wanted to or agree with you. You know, they're kind of stuck on a track. And then when you get back in 5 years from now, when they're ready, the same people aren't there or on board or remember the conversation. So there is a lot of fragmentation, but the other aspect is really just having people see that vision, to buy into the vision, make it their own. What responsibilities do they feel they could take ownership of, and let them do that, and hopefully would always kind of follow back around to make sure you guys are on the same, you know, going to the same place.
Great. That's it's a real challenge to go through, you know, years of trying to put a project together, and then things seem to fall apart just with one little thing of like, oh, I don't remember that. So you know what, can I ask you guys, and I'll start with Claire, we'll go back to Claire. What is your organization doing right now that excites you the most in what you guys are doing?
I think what excites me the most is the outcomes that we're seeing from some of the leaders that have gone through our community programs. So with Neighborhood Leadership Fellows, from our first 3 years of participants, we've had 26 people run for office, and 16 of them were successful in being elected or reelected. And this is the program where everybody is from the St. Louis Promise Zone. And we've also looked at a lot of different boards and commissions, and we're thinking about, you know, really it's about power, and what's related to power is money and resources. And so in terms of the city has the new committee, it's the Capital Resource Allocation Committee focused on the ARPA funds, that 500 million that's coming into the city. And so there's this new sort of resident driven group that's been nominated. And so we have 9 of our graduates out of the on that committee. So that's really exciting. The city or the county had a CARES Act committee focused on the allocation of those resources, and we had 2 of our graduates on that. So just the outcomes that we're seeing of some of the residents being able to really have their voice heard, voice shared, sitting at decision-making tables on boards, and also starting their own organizations and creating their own tables. And I think that's really exciting, because the power is now that they're also, people know each other in a different way, and they're able to tap into each other's strengths to really see this region flourish. And so I think that the sort of movement that we've seen through resident leadership is growing, and that conversation in partnership with planners is really exciting too. So I think another, success example is the West End neighborhood. There are some really incredible, amazing leaders in that community who have been able to partner with planners and are working now on a community plan for their neighborhood. And the potential there is just mind-blowing. I'm so excited for that neighborhood and everything that they're working on, and the way they're doing it in a really thoughtful, community-driven way. So that's what I'm excited about.
Great. That's amazing progress that you're making on those committees and getting those individuals involved. Mary, same question to you. I mean, what about the work that you're doing right now is just really exciting, and helps you get up every morning and come do your job?
Yeah, and sort of a similar way, we have been having, hard conversations with communities for years about stormwater and protecting natural resources, and it's we're really starting to see people in Southwestern Illinois communities understand the value of that. I think there's a lot of more awareness of climate change and what that is doing and infrastructure needs in our region. And so we've been able to bring in some pretty large grant funds to the region to implement some of these things. And the more successes we're having, getting those on the ground and taking people out and showing them how they work and how it can be a huge benefit to not only the community, but the farmer whose field it's affecting or the neighborhood that it's in, really is helping pick up steam. And we're starting to now see a lot more communities asking for these types of practices in their communities, which is just, that's what.
Oh, looks like maybe Mary froze up there. John, if you want to kind of talk a little bit what gives you some excitement with your new position there in the city of St. Louis.
Thank you. I'm very excited for neighborhood planning, what's to come. I'm really excited to see, not only to build, but to also be a part of the community with all these passionate people, as Claire, you mentioned, just people who are very energetic and energized to get things done. I will say this plain as day this is the beginning to the ending of redlining. And I see this as the celebration. Redlining was the intentional disinvestment into certain areas, and this spills out into many different arenas. And as Bob mentioned, from the wage gap and how many things that affects to I mean, you mentioned a number of things, and I see this truly as looking at it as the end of redlining, the reverse of resources into funneling it into the community. We see a lot more people and organizations and parties behind either understanding these issues or even committing to change. So, in 10 years, by the next decennial census, I would love to see, population growth, if we could do things right, of, 48 to 50,000 people in St. Louis and another, a couple 100,000 throughout the state of Missouri. And I believe a lot of that status quo or just the leapfrog type of developments are because of, not enough resources, because with redlining, people did not have, their gardens didn't have the opportunity to grow as they should, to bloom. So now people are going to be, allowed to bloom. And I'm just happy to aid in the process of that. One great example is the investment with the NGA. With that seed came a number of people together for making St. Louis the geospatial hub of the world. And some of the programs that they look at included the education pipeline for kids, 4, 5, 8, 10, to ultimately end up filling that needed talent pool. And I see planning in that as, the NGAs adjacent to a number of schools on the north side. And they will be next to a number of youth. And in 10 years from now, I'm going to love seeing these youth have an excellent time, because I see planning, we're not in the classroom, but we're outside the classroom, that sidewalk that, kids have to walk from 8 to 12 years of their life. The land use activities that we can influence for the better. That's what we're going to do. We're going to have a fun time doing it. I see all the vacancies as a very big opportunity to say, hey, we already got the land, one issue down, acquisition of land. I don't have that issue. So it's like, what can we do to kind of give that back and make it very positive for, and then we fit into what, going back to the NJ example, how can we fit land use and making a healthy environment upbringing, showing people how that does affect geospatial NGA, or whether it be MLS, and how many kids now can play soccer on nice fields in their schools, how we can offer to offset what the private sector needs kind of a partner with. So very excited for the future of St. Louis.
Great, thanks, John. We're coming up on 1:30 here. I wanted to give you guys each an opportunity to answer, a kind of a two-part question. I mean, we've all chosen St. Louis as a region to do our profession. Some of us transplanted, some of us obviously born and raised in the St. Louis area. So I guess my two-part question here is, why St. Louis? What opportunities as planners do you see, and then what can we do as planners in our municipalities and planners within our region, that may be consultants or providing guidance to communities. What can we do? What are there? What should we be striving to do? So I'll start with Claire on that one. I know it's a little bit of a long question there, but hopefully you have some good answers.
So the two-part was what are the opportunities and what should we be doing?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Well, I think there's, so I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, if you I have friends who want to be in politics, and so they're looking to Washington, D.C. And I have friends who are, looking to be in the financial industry, and they're moving to New York. And I have friends who are in the entertainment industry, and they're in Los Angeles. But I want to be in social justice, and so I'm in St. Louis. And so I think, I think there's a lot of opportunity, hopefully in a positive way around thinking about St. Louis as a place where if you care about people and communities and planning for strong outcomes for our people and communities and investing in people, that this could be the place to come. And can we be a model for the rest of the country for what it looks like? Because I think if it could happen in St. Louis, if it could happen in Missouri, it could happen anywhere. This is a kind of we're in the middle of the country, and we have that potential to be really a model for the rest of the nation. And so I think, again, I think that the path toward doing that is to think creatively about how we make sure that community voice is at the helm. And I love hearing what John said around, the end of redlining and making sure that the planning that we do incorporates both community voice, but also the policy change that we need to see in order to have a really equitable community. And so, so I think it sounds like there's a lot of great work being done in a number of areas on this front. One of the things that we've sort of, in terms of opportunities, have been looking at too is this urban-rural divide, and thinking not only about St. Louis, but thinking about Missouri, and what does that look like to build relationships across the state? And are there bridges to be built, and what does that look like, and how to do it? And what we're finding is that there's a lot of commonalities and a lot of opportunities to see those commonalities on an individual basis when community leaders get to know each other and can learn from each other. So I definitely think that's an opportunity that we should be looking at as well.
Mary, it looks like you're back. Can you talk a little bit too about some of the things that you see as opportunities through your work that creates that same type of I used opportunities twice, but that you feel like we should be doing and need to be doing to find St. Louis as a better region?
Yeah, I think, Bob had mentioned climate change and migration as a possibility, and can the St. Louis region be a model for the rest of the country about that? And I think that should be a goal we strive for. It is an opportunity for us to all look at how we try to adapt to this changing climate along social justice lines so that it's an equitable adaptation to it. And there are ways planners definitely should be getting involved with that. You should be looking at your community's natural resources, their streams, your floodplains, your creeks, as parts of your infrastructure system. It's not separate. I know we didn't build it, but it exists for a reason. It's part of our infrastructure in our communities. It's already there doing things for us. So if we start there, I think that is like a major thing that we could all work together. And we have to do it regionally, right? Because rainwater doesn't just stay in your town. If you're in the Metro East, for example, it flows down the bluffs into a lot of under-resourced communities and overloads their already strained system. So how can we think about really taking care of the stormwater in our communities up on the bluff so that we're not hurting people down below the bluff? So I think we have opportunities to look at all those types of systems and policies already in place. So
awesome. Thanks, Mary. John, same question to you. What are the things that we can be doing to make St. Louis a national recognized city?
Outside of my scope, I'm going to just quickly go to one thing that Claire mentioned, which was in-state, outstate, kind of Missouri versus Missouri. There are a ton of, I mean, Missouri is, I'll just give a quick spiel. Within 4 to 5 hours of Missouri, you can take a lot of trips, Memphis, Chicago, Kansas City, there's that. Two is we have so many recreational opportunities, rivers, lakes, streams, caves, zip lining and all that. There is a relationship between the two. And three, the food we have within 500 miles of St. Louis, the biggest food, maker distribution, we grow it too. So there are a lot of items that we should really look at how to, St. Louis should be the best destination for a day getaway. Wineries as well without, breaking the bank. So there's just a lot of synergy that we can use to grow the region. But I would say in my job, it would be more to look to celebrating culture and being more inclusive. So there's a lot of things that we did not, either we weren't responsible for, we did not build, but we're here now, and don't tell us we can't change it, because we can. So example policies would be, an easy one is, how many of you have walked on a sidewalk, a new sidewalk, next to a road that allows for 40, 50 miles an hour traffic? There are some things that people, if you are a new parent, that's very unsafe. And I know I had conversations with a few of you, Jackie, here on the line, we had lunch over this topic. That's unsafe. It's really not comfortable, but don't tell us that we can't do anything about it, because we can. So looking at not only who's at the table, but pouring your values into what you do, because I'm just going to say that's what happened 40, 50, 100 years ago. So we should definitely do the same thing. I look at, the number of women on this call, even 50 years ago, it wasn't like that. And do you think that your point of view was always put into the development of everything? You could definitely, I know that for kids, for example, there are sidewalk, I just use sidewalks are an easy one that everyone goes to, but it's like, look at things and see how they reflect your and how they celebrate, how they encourage you to want to be there, to be comfortable there, and to be suitable for you. So I look at what I can do with neighborhood planning as, we're not just replacing you, but we want to make it suitable for you for now, for 5 years from now, and for 20 years from now.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We're at 1:34 or 5. I just want to give each of you an opportunity, if you had something that you wanted to add, that you were hoping to say. I know we didn't get through all our questions, but just give you an opportunity. Bob, did you have anything, final words of wisdom?
Couple of thoughts, just real quick. Take to heart what John said about two things. One, we want to be the geospatial capital of the world, hub of the world. We are a world-class city. And also, don't tell us we can't do it, because we can. Take to heart Claire's passion for the job she's doing. Expressed well. Even some comments in the chat do the same thing. And Mary's comments that treat our natural systems as part of our infrastructure. It is part of us. It's part of that culture that John mentions, is also part of everything we do and why we have land use patterns like we have, like why we enjoy the place. So partly it points out that planners, even if you're not really a master's degree in planning, you're still a planner. There's a lot we can be doing for social equity. Thank you, Claire, for saying that's why we want to be here. But also for what we can do for the environment as well, and all the people. So great, that was a great conversation.
Awesome, thank you. Claire, did you have any final information?
No, I think Bob summed it up nicely. Thanks for having me.
All right, very good. John or Mary? Anything else? All right, well, we'll
I
leave.
just wanted to
Oh.
thank you guys
Yeah.
very much, and I just want to put a plug in for the state conference that's virtual with Texas coming up soon. So just putting a plug there. So
Yeah, well, kind of leading into that, first and foremost, thank you to the panel. Thank you to the folks that have sat through their Friday lunch with us. Just a few things to point out to you. Building off of what John was talking about, our transportation system, Charles Marone is going to be in town October 7th. He will be at El Mostero on the St. Louis University campus. It's a planning program put together by TrailNet, CNU, your St. Louis section of APA, and St. Louis University. We're really looking forward to it. There is a no registration fees. It is limited to 100 people due to the capacity and social distancing required by SLU. So if you are available on the 7th, I highly recommend going to that. You can find more information on strongtowns.org, and that will start at 6 o'clock. Also, the Metro section will be putting on a lunch in October, again around transit with a panel of great speakers talking about transit-oriented development and bus rapid transit. And then finally, as John mentioned, we do have the Missouri State Conference as well as the Illinois State Conference, both available virtually. And then if you have any commissioners or elected officials or community activists that want to get more information about planning and why it's important, the UMSL Chancellor Certificate in Planning and Zoning is still accepting applications. It starts October 14th, and this year it'll also be held virtually. So hopefully that will provide access to some more people. So with that, I would again like to thank our panelists and those of you that have joined us today. And we will see you hopefully on the 7th or October 20th as we celebrate Community Planning Month. Thanks, guys.
thank you guys.